About our interview time, and I am very blessed here to have a very special guest in the studio, Dr. David Tasker. Dr. David, welcome to the Breakfast Show.
Thank you so much.
I heard that you have a very incredible story of a time that God did something for you in your life. So, and there's involving massive waves, a very small dinghy / boat in the middle of the ocean. And I just want to say, for our listeners, what do you do at the moment, Dr. David? I heard that you're a theologian. Do you lecture? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've done all kinds of things, Gav.
Okay.
But I'm retired, quote unquote, at the moment.
Okay.
I'm not sure what retirement means, but we're trying.
There you go. Look, Dr. David, actually, you were one of my lecturers. I was a distance student, so we wouldn't have had a relationship.
Okay.
But you were one of my lecturers when I was studying theology at Avondale back in the days.
Right.
I don't remember what. I think did you used to teach New Testament or Old Testament?
Old Testament.
Oh, so it was like a Daniel and Old Testament, I think, subject. It was really, really enjoyable. So, Dr. David, tell me a little bit about a time where you found yourself in a tiny boat in the middle of the ocean, and suddenly this biblical storm started to come through. So what happened there? How did you even get yourself into that situation? What happened?
Yeah, this was a few years ago now, when I was a lot younger, and we were living in the Solomons in quite a remote area. And I was an administrator of that region. And we were visiting some distant spot. We used our mission launch, which was about a 45-foot, 14 meters or something. Mm-hmm. And we were at this place that was quite distant from our headquarters. And on the boat was a radio, a single sideband kind of a shortwave thing. And the message came, I had to go back to Kukundu, which was where our base was. There was going to be a delegation of Australian people from the High Commission and someone from Canberra. They wanted to see how we'd spent their money, Australian taxpayer right. money.
Yes.
And this was for our high school, so there was quite a bit of building that we had done. They wanted to come and check up on it. Have we used the money correctly?
Yes.
Have we wasted it? Whatever, just checking up. So when that radio call came, we're about 95 kilometres away from where we should go back to, and that boat was quite expensive to run, and I thought, I can't afford to do that. So I negotiated with some of the locals there, can I go back on one of your canoes? And so a couple of them agreed for that, and it was a 3-hour journey across back to where we were. You get absolutely drenched in this kind of a trip because these little canoes, they got an outboard motor on the back, and so there's a lot of splashing. And early morning, it's very calm. But after we'd seen our guests and they were happy with what they saw, we had to go back. But we're getting into the middle of the day now, and the wind is rising, and so are the waves. So we set out and we went around about 30 kilometres around the coast before heading across the strait, another 60-odd k's, and it was looking pretty bad. And so the guys who were with me, the two of them there, they said, let's just wait for a while and hopefully the sea will die down, the wind will get a bit calm. But it doesn't do that. It just gets worse. And
at this point, how far from the coast were you?
We were on the coast. We stayed at a village.
Okay.
Just stopped at a village waiting
for better conditions.
For better conditions. But better conditions don't always come. And it was getting worse. And I thought, we've got to get back before it gets too worse. So we set off. Now, when I'm talking about a canoe, I'm talking about a dugout, hollowed log, just dug out from a log. But these guys are brilliant canoe makers. I watched one of them once, and he had an adze, and he was just chipping away on the inside of the canoe, and then he would, with his hands, touch either side to gauge the thickness, and if it was the thickness of his index finger, the first digit of his index finger, that was the correct.
Wow.
Yeah, and brilliant.
Incredible.
So these things would sit on the water just so balanced. They were amazing cried.
And they managed to equip them with like a full boat engine at the back?
Just an outboard motor. So the front end was pointy and the back end was flat, so they could screw an outboard engine onto it.
It's like tradition meeting technology.
Yeah. So they would go at about 20 or 30 knots. No, not 30, maybe 20 knots. And so I thought, okay, we'll go, it's time. We should get back now. They kind of looked a bit, can we do this or can't we? But they were willing, so let's go. So we did. We set out across the strait. Again, I said about 60 kilometres, and you don't go far before you lose all sight of land. And we didn't have a compass, and we had no life jackets, and off we go. And the waves are getting bigger and bigger, and they're starting to cap. They're starting to crash into the canoe. So I'm sitting at the front. There's a guy in the middle, and he's really bailing fast. He had to. And the guy at the back just, controlling the engine. After some time, when the waves are getting worse and capping more, you start to think about life and possibly the ending of it. And I was just starting to think about, is this my last day on Earth? So you start to think about eternal things, and you start to your life flashes in front of your eyes, and you think about this and you think about that. And if I was a better father at this situation, and if I could see that guy, I'd apologise to him. Now, all this kind of stuff, it was
wow.
I thought this is the end. I'm not going to get out of this. And then, as I was thinking these kind of thoughts, I heard the motor, and the motor just stopped. Instead of being full revs, it just go right down to nothing. And I thought, oh man, we've lost the engine, because that last big wave, we lost the engine. And I looked around, and it wasn't the engine that was lost, it was the guy that was driving it. He had completely disappeared, no sign of him. And so the guy in the middle that was doing the bailing, he went to the back to hold the engine and to keep us going. I went to the middle because someone had to do the bailing. And over this mountain of water, we heard, "I'm over here!" So all credit to this guy now, this new driver. He did a circle in waves that, when you're sitting in the canoe and you're looking up, the waves are at least 3 meters. So these are just horrendous things. And it's not a mountain of water that what it's going to do, because all of a sudden it drops and another one comes up in its place, and it's just impossible to imagine what's happening next. But he did a circle, and about 15 or 20 minutes later we got this guy, and he clambered on board, and I thought, we've just done a circle, which direction are we going to head into now? No compass. These two guys chatter away in their language, and they point, and they start going, and I thought, oh, this is really interesting, Lord. This is my day. But after a while, I saw a shaft of light, and it was coming down onto the destination we were heading for. It was still quite a distance to travel, and at least we could see land, and at least there was a bit of a shaft of light on it, because the rest of the place was just whited out with clouds and rain. And
so what do you make of this shaft of light? Do you think it was just God kind of giving, hey, this is the direction you should go? Do you think that it was like God's intervention at that point?
Oh, I think so. So I had that kind of sense of peace. You kind of try and make your peace with God, as people say. In other words, you're thinking, what else do I need to do here? I guess in reflection afterwards, there's nothing you can do. I mean, just God is either looking after you or he's saying time out. But I just felt confident that, time was still going, and we're going to be okay. I just felt that we're going to be okay. And about an hour or two later, we actually got to that place.
Wow.
So it's about 7, it's after 7. It might be, 15 minutes after 7 or something. And that meeting should have started at 7. And all the people are in the meeting house, and they're singing. And I think, well, they got confidence that something's going to happen. So just as well I did. I get cleaned up and go back, and that's the story.
Wow, that is amazing. So the people that were seeing the house, so were these the people representing the High Commission?
No. This was the village people, because we were at this place for a series of meetings, and people would come from miles away, literally up and down the coast. And we had films, and one of them I remember very clearly was called Careless Charlie, and it was a health film, just showing people hygiene and things like that. So they were interested in the film, and they were interested in what we had to say for them.
Oh, so when you return back to the village from which you departed originally, not
Yes.
to the place where the meeting with the government officials was supposed to happen.
Yeah.
What happened with them? Like, did you end up making contact with them and saying, "Hey, I'm sorry, I couldn't come to our commitment"?
I got to that
You got
place.
to the place?
I was able to meet them. We had a walk around the campus. They were able to see what we had built. They were happy, and they went back very soon after on the chartered plane that they had. So then I had to head back to my appointment for the evening.
And did you get to share with them what happened? Like, how was the journey to?
No.
So they were absolutely clueless that you were just a couple of hours before. You're just putting your life in straight with God because you're thinking that.
Yeah, you've
So
missed.
he went to talk with the people from the Royal Commission, and then after that, then this whole experience on the waves takes place immediately after that.
Okay, I'm getting it.
That's why it was middle of the day,
Yeah.
and the waves were getting worse because he'd gone back
Okay.
on this little canoe.
Okay, now I got situated here.
So we went early morning to get
Yes,
to this.
so we had the meetings, and then on your trip back, that's when this whole ordeal has happened. So I'm wondering here, one question that I wanted to ask, like, did that experience change your relationship with God in any way? Like, after that experience, like, did you, when you're praying to God or you're seeing God, like, did you learn anything different from that?
Maybe. Sometimes you face a situation where there's nothing humanly possible. There's nothing you can do. And I guess I learned at that time, well, when there's nothing that you can do, there's no use getting anxious, no use stewing. Put it in God's hands, and whatever happens is going to be okay.
And look, Dr. David, I think that a lot of people that I've been talking to, they are quite anxious regarding the current situation, because look, we hear of wars and rumors of wars, and surely Jesus says, look, don't worry about them. This is not the end. This is just the beginning of the birth pangs. Lift up your head, rejoice in everything. But I think that for a long time, we haven't seen that how a conflict overseas, miles and miles away from where we are, they are impacting our livelihoods right now. And a lot of people are already hurting a lot with increased prices of everything, and a lot of people living from paycheck to paycheck and barely making ends meet. And now all of a sudden they say, hey, by the way, your food is going to increase, and maybe you're not going to even going to have fuel. Maybe you don't have to have a job or a work. How do you think, now that you have experienced this helpless situation, what would you say to, let's say, a young person facing, or maybe a young family facing these consequences of perhaps an impending loss of employment, loss of income, even greater pressures in their family budget? What would you be your advice to them based on in that experience that you lived through?
Oh, that's a big question. But let me just say this, take God seriously, because there will be times when there's absolutely nothing you can do. And even worrying about it is not going to improve the situation. As Jesus says, if you worry, it's not going to add height to your statue. It's not going to put food on your table. You're just totally dependent upon what God can do for you. And that gives you a sense of peace. So I think what I've learned from this is, in those times where it's very stressful, you can choose either to be very stressed or to take God seriously when he says, I'm always with you.
Yes, I love it. There are situations that we have nothing we can do, but you know what? If we can rely and trust in God, say, God, like I'm really at your hands here. That can be quite reassuring, can it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I found.
Yeah. And look, Dr. David, this is quite an interesting question. I'm wondering, Lindsay, do you have any questions that you wanted to ask also to Dr. David? If not, look, one of the questions that I wanted to ask is, what happened to the other two canoe guys? Were they in peace? Were you at peace at that time? Like because you were kind of facing your fate. You're thinking that, like, I'm going to die here. What about your colleagues at the boat? How were they taking this whole experience? Were they chilled, or were they, just like you, or even more stressed out? What is your recollection of their attitude?
The difference between me and them is that I was a stranger in a strange place. They were locals. They knew the place. And the reason that they could be so sure about where they were going is they could read the waves and the currents, and they knew which direction to head out. So they were chill. They were fine.
Wow. I think there's even like a spiritual application there, isn't it? Is that when we know that we're connected with the God, when we kind of know where the currents of the world are taking anyway, we know the direction of our life, that ultimately, even if we lose our life, we ended up finding it in heaven, at the resurrection with Jesus. And that can also perhaps give us that same sense of peace and safety, knowing where we are going.
Yes.
It reminds me of Jesus, when he came to his disciples and says, hey, to Peter, at the moment, Peter, you can choose whatever you want to dress and what you want to wear and where you want to go, but there's going to be a time that you're not going to be choosing where you'll be going and what to wear. And Jesus was signifying his death.
Yeah.
And I think that when God can give us that assurance as well, hey, we know that even in the worst case scenario, aka we die, we know where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
We're resting at the grave until Jesus calls us back and there to eternity and never to suffer again. And I think that also can bring comfort, can it?
Yes, and it's important to know that in terms of our eternal destiny, it's not what we do. It's what God does for us and what he has done in Christ. And as we keep that in mind, in the back of our mind, that gives us a stability to go through any situation we might face.
Yeah, amazing. Look, Dr. David, thank you so much for coming here, for sharing with us. We actually want to give a giveaway. We have a book called Answers to Prayers by Roger Murnau. This is a fantastic book as well. We know Roger Murnau shares stories similar to stories of Dr. David Tasker, and stories where he was in situations where there's nothing humanly possible that could be done to leave the situation, yet God delivered. So, Dr. David, thank you so much for sharing this story. I'm going to keep and treasure that story in my heart and meditate and think about it today. Think, what? Wow, what would I do if I was in that situation? Would I be able to trust in God? Say, God, here is my life, here's my heart. Help me be in peace with Him or be delivered from it. I want to be able to have that experience of trust in Him, particularly as we don't know what's going to happen in the future. But I do know one thing: I want to be able to trust in God as we go. So, Dr. David, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we're looking forward to have you again next time. Perhaps have other stories that you would like to share. We would love to hear them here on the studio, on the radio. We're now going to be listening to Keith and Kristen Getty with Across the Lands. You're listening to The Breakfast Show on Faith FM. And if you have any messages or any questions, you can text us in 0491 064 669. Our hashtag for our giveaway is #answers.
Thanks for being a part of the Faith FM family. Join our community on Facebook or get in touch at 1-800-FAITH-FM.